Membership of the EU would be speeded up in return for stemming the flow of migrants across its border. But then on Thursday, members of the European Parliament called for a halt to those talks because of the Turkish government's harsh response to July's attempted coup. Let's get more now from the BBC's Mark Lowen, who reports from Istanbul.
It was Europe's worst migration crisis since the Second World War. Over 1 million fleeing war and poverty for Europe. Many never made it, and as deaths mounted and fences went up, the EU was plunged into crisis. This was a fix of sorts, a deal with Turkey last March to deport some back here. Mainly Pakistanis have been sent back so far. Along with border closures in the Balkans, it stemmed the flow. But now Turkey's president has hit out at Europe, threatening to undo the deal and send migrants back.
You have said in the past, what will we do if Turkey opens the borders? Well, if you go any further, those border gates will be opened.
Under the EU deal, migrants arriving in Greece are sent back to Turkey if they don't apply for asylum or their claim is rejected. For each Syrian returned, the EU is to take in another Syrian who's made a legitimate request. Although the migrant arrivals were already down, it's clear the deal helped keep numbers at a fraction of their monthly high. The Parliament vote on Turkey was non-binding, and EU leaders are unlikely to heed it, fearful of alienating a vital ally. But there's anger in Brussels at what some see as blackmail by Mr. Erdogan, whose politics they don't like.
No political opposition, is that a democracy? No. No press freedom, is it a democracy? No. Should the EU negotiate with countries that are not democracies anymore? My answer is no.
Turkey hosts 3 million migrants, but many are integrated and will stay. For others, though, the dream of Europe is still there.
If the borders are open, maybe after 1 month, 2 months, or maybe after the winter, yes, they will go. They will not stay here.
But not you?
No, not for me actually.
You want to stay here?
Yeah, I want to stay here.
I'd like to go to England, he says, but it would be hard. If the borders opened, everyone would try to go to Europe. But I do like life in Turkey. It's given us everything. There is always a lot for domestic consumption in President Erdogan's rhetoric. His combative tone is often not followed up by action. But he does hold the trump card with Europe on the migrant deal, and even threatening to play it will send shivers to Brussels and Berlin. The EU needs Turkey despite the bad blood. The migrants have become a bargaining chip. A nervous Europe now waits to see if Turkey's strongman leader will unleash his fury. Mark Lowen, BBC News, Istanbul.
Does he mean it? That's the question, isn't it, I suppose? To try and answer that question, we're joined by Fadi Hakura, who manages the Turkey project at the think tank Chatham House. So you have some insight, perhaps, into President Erdogan's thinking. What I don't get is it's Turkey's so far behind in its accession towards the EU. It's such a long way off. Why did he feel the need to make this threat anyway? It doesn't make much difference.
President Erdogan is not interested in Turkey joining the European Union. What he's trying to do is to extract more concessions from Europe, particularly financial inducements, in order to continue stemming the flow of Syrian and non-Syrian refugees, migrants into mainland Europe.
His leverage is those thousands upon thousands of men, women and children in refugee camps in Turkey, isn't it?
He has made this threat before, but I think this time around Europe is far more prepared than it was in 2015. Many European countries, particularly those on the Balkans, bordering Turkey, have erected fences to prevent the flow of Syrian migrants into mainland Europe. Plus, Europe has taken some steps across the Mediterranean to prevent the flow into the Aegean and into Greece.
Is it also a matter of pride, though, for President Erdogan? He has been heavily criticised for his reaction to the coup, many accusing him of using the coup as an excuse to clamp down on opposition journalists, judges, you name it.
President Erdogan is trying to whip up national sentiments in Turkey in order to in order to amend the constitution to introduce a very powerful executive presidency. That seems to be now his number one priority, to transform Turkey from a parliamentary republic into an executive presidency by the middle of next year.
Europe's also promised legal avenues for refugees to enter the EU. That would obviously ease the burden on Turkey as well. That hasn't happened though, has it?
There is very little enthusiasm among many European countries not to welcome Syrian and non-Syrian migrants. We've seen, for example, Hungary, the Czech Republic, Poland, and other countries trying to withdraw, trying to prevent the flow of migrants into their countries.
So Fadi, very, very briefly, if it came to it, would he do it? Would he open the borders?
I doubt that he will do it. Like before, this threat, I think, will not be carried out.
Fadi, many thanks for joining us. It's becoming clear that Paris has been the target of another major attack inspired by so-called Islamic State. The French authorities say 5 men arrested in raids on Sunday were planning to carry out assaults in the capital next week. The plotters had researched a number of landmarks. They include the Champs-Élysées in the centre of the city. Also in their sights, Disneyland Paris, another major tourist destination on the edge of the capital. The criminal police headquarters, along with cafes and metro stations, were also on the list, according to prosecutors who gave the details of the arrests earlier.
Les opérations d'interpellation menées dans la nuit de samedi à dimanche.
The arrests undertaken during the night of Saturday into Sunday have resulted in the avoidance of new deadly attacks on French soil. The elements we found in our investigations, as well as online and telephone-based intelligence, points to this. The findings are that the criminals were already in possession of weapons, were seeking more financing, as well as getting ready to attack and searching for targets.
It's all quite frightening, isn't it? We're joined now by Pierre Canessa, a former French Defence Ministry official and author of several books on counter-terrorism, and he joins us now from Nice. Thank you very much for joining us. Do you think this is the terrorists getting better at their planning and boldness, or is it the French police getting better at catching them?
I would say probably the both, because some points seems to me very important. The first point regarding the conference, the press conference of the prosecutor, is that some of these terrorist groups, some members of the groups have been probably delivered some crash program, to prepare them for terrorist attack, because they just spent a few days in Syria. The second aspect, which seems to be important in the organization, is probably that that's remote control, operation from Syria. We had, by the past, a lot of a terrorist attack like that, probably controlled by Rachid Kassim, who is a former French citizen. And the last point, which also seems to be important, is probably there are two different teams, in contact, but not directly, which means that they are using probably encrypted, web social network like Telegram. And so they can, join, discuss, but they will be probably operating at the last moment together. And regarding also at this level of the prosecution, it seems that they had a lot of targets, which means that probably they can choose, regarding the local situation. And those new aspects are very important for me.
And it's interesting that the prosecutor named Disneyland Paris and other targets as well, such as the Christmas market. That can only damage tourism and confidence in people wanting to travel to France for a much needed tourist economy. Why would the prosecutor name the targets like that?
Well, probably there are several targets regarding the news we had in the newspaper, and we're also preparing something regarding the Préfecture de Police, for example, which means that a very significant place. But also probably to have the more mediatic effect is to choose a very crowded place, and the Christmas market seems to be one. But probably they had to choose, between different aspects of terrorist targets.
And why is it, do you think, Pierre, that Paris seems to be the main focus for terrorist attacks in Europe?
I think that there are several explanations for that. The first one is that France is the country of EU which has the most important Jewish community and the most important Muslim community, which means that it's I would say, a fragile situation. The second aspect is because, we seems to more regarding the analysis of this jihadists, we seems to be the most Islamophobic country, quote unquote. And the last point is probably that we are also punished because the French government is using a lot of, I would say, very warmonger speeches about Syria. And that's why, we are punished because of who we are, but also because of what we do.
Well, thank goodness there was no punishment this time, Pierre, and the police got there first. Thank you very much for talking to us.
You're welcome.
A look at some other of the day's news in brief now. At least 31 people have been killed in a collision between two passenger trains in Iran. State television showed two carriages on fire following the accident just east of the capital, Tehran. It's believed a passenger train rammed into the back of a broken-down intercity express. At least 70 people have been treated at hospital. A white man accused of shooting dead 9 black parishioners at a Charleston church in the US state of South Carolina has been ruled mentally fit to stand trial. 22-year-old Dylan Roof faces dozens of charges over the incident in 2015, including 9 counts of murder. Federal prosecutors claim the killings were racially motivated. Thousands of Filipinos have demonstrated against the burial of former dictator Ferdinand Marcos in a heroes cemetery. They claim it venerates a man accused of widespread plunder and brutality. Marcos ruled the Philippines for 20 years, imposing martial law and governing by decree. Police in Israel have arrested 12 people in connection with arson as firefighters struggle to control wildfires that have been burning for 4 days now. Officials say that more than half of the blazes were started deliberately. Some politicians have suggested that Palestinians and Israeli Arabs may be responsible for the fires, which have forced tens of thousands of people from their homes. Yolan Nel reports now from central Israel.
Another nighttime emergency, but even the crew in this fire engine expresses shock. Driving into a village west of Jerusalem. And the dramatic view from the skies over the northern city of Haifa, where several huge blazes were raging out of control. Firefighting planes have been sent from southern Europe, Turkey, Russia and the United States. And now, many of the tens of thousands of people who fled are returning to their homes, or what's left of them.
We came back and we saw all this mess, all the albums here. That's the memory of my parents burnt out.
Across Israel, there's been dry weather and strong winds are fanning the fires. In Bet Meir, we see more of the aftermath.
Firefighters are putting out the last of the flames here. Much of this village is still smouldering. Families were rushed from their homes in the middle of the night. Several houses have been badly damaged or destroyed. And the suspicion here, as in other parts of Israel, is that the fire was started by arson.
Israeli officials believe half the fires over the past 4 days were deliberate, and some politicians are implicating Palestinians and the country's Arab minority. The Prime Minister says arsonists are terrorists.
The instruction is to bring to justice everyone that committed such an offense, that those that tried to burn the state of Israel will be punished to the fullest extent.
But in Haifa, some unexpected assistance. These Palestinian firefighters came from the West Bank to work with Israelis. While there have been some encouraging signs, there are fears the fires will continue, with no rain forecast for days. Yolan Nel, BBC News in central Israel.
A total of 7 former British footballers have now stepped forward to reveal that they were sexually abused by their coach when they were young players. 4 police forces in England are now investigating claims about abuse in the sports youth system during the 1980s and 1990s. Our correspondent Natalie Perks reports.
I thought, I've got to come forward. Got to come forward and help everybody.
Chris Unsworth had never told his story before, not to a single soul. But today he finally told the harrowing tale he'd tried to bury. A story of how serial paedophile coach Barry Bennell had started raping him at the age of 9.
I didn't know what was going on, to be fair. I knew where I wanted to get, and I thought, this is obviously what I've got to go through.
Did you know it was wrong? What he was doing was wrong?
I knew it was wrong, but I just went with it. Just went with it.
Barry Bennell has been jailed 3 times for child sexual abuse. He described himself as a monster in court papers in 2015. But speaking to the BBC in 1991, he was a picture of professionalism.
We really work the kids up, they're learning all the time. And we do a lot of talking to, as well as showing them their skills and explaining the game to them. But we explain that there's more to it than just coming here 1 hour a week.
He's permanently suspended from football. Yesterday, police removed a dog and property from his house in Milton Keynes. It's been a tough week for English football since Andy Woodward waived his anonymity to reveal the abuse he suffered at the hands of Bennell. Now 6 other players have come forward to allege abuse, including an unnamed player in today's Guardian newspaper, who claims he was abused by convicted paedophile youth coach George Ormond while he was at Newcastle United. It shows the story is potentially spreading wider than just one coach, wider than just one area. The obvious question now is, could football have done more?
Is it feasible that other adults at the time really didn't know what was happening?
Impossible.
Crewe Alexandra's director of football and former manager Dario Gradi released a statement yesterday saying no one at the club knew of Bennell's crimes until 1994, when he was arrested in America.
I was the same as every boy on this settee. I had a dream of being a footballer, and every child who has a dream, to me, should be able to try and achieve that dream without having to go through sexual abuse or being around sexual predators.
For the man whose story started this, Andy Woodward, some sense of relief.
Last week I was on here, I was on my own, and I was so scared, but I knew that they were here. I've got, honest to God, Victoria, I can't thank the public enough, and the media, and more importantly, the lads for backing me up, you know. I'm just totally overwhelmed.
Yeah.
One man's heartbreak, leading others to finally feel able to share their torment. Natalie Perks, BBC News.
Absolutely shocking, isn't it? Sales of firecrackers have been banned in the Indian capital, Delhi, after hazardous smog levels increased during the Diwali festival at the end of October. The Supreme Court has told authorities to study any harmful effects, and it follows a petition that was filed on behalf of 3 infants on the grounds that their lungs were not developed enough to handle the increasing pollution. And in Peru, when authorities destroyed a massive haul of illegal fireworks, it turned out to be quite a spectacular display. The 21 tonnes were exploded safely at a remote site near Lima, as you can see. Peru has some very, very strict regulations, in fact the strictest in Latin America. It's because of a blaze at a warehouse back in 2001 that killed hundreds of people. No nonsense when it comes to illegal fireworks. An Israeli man is under arrest after driving his car the wrong way down a motorway and then crashing into a police car. This is a monitoring video which shows the car speeding along the road near Hadera and then smashing into the police vehicle that was positioned at a roadblock. The 40-year-old man was arrested at the scene. Now to South Korea, where political tensions are rising after police blocked roads to stop angry farmers from joining a protest against the country's president. Hundreds of thousands are expected in the capital, Seoul, again on Saturday, calling on Park Geun-hye to resign over a corruption scandal. Prosecutors say she was an accomplice in a scheme to pressure companies to hand over millions of dollars. Steve Adams reports now from one of the roadblocks.
These farmers are going up to the big demonstration on Saturday and they've been stopped by the police and there are incidents because they've been told you can't proceed with banners on your vehicles. And there's clearly a lot of anger here. If you look round, the police are blocking the road. Some of the farmers have slashed the sacks and put the grain on the floor. So you get a sense of rising anger here. All the demonstrations on Saturday so far have been very, very peaceful, almost like carnivals. But now farmers are involved, and farmers are known for militancy and anger. The police are just outside Seoul. Particularly, they've been told you can't move without banners. They say, are you protecting the people? This is what one of the farmers said to the police. Are you protecting the people, or are you protecting Park Geun-hye? You get a sense of tensions rising and this whole thing coming to a climax. Next week, there is the possibility of President Park Geun-hye being impeached. In effect, the parliament saying, we're going to sack you. If that happens, it would be the first time it's happened in democratic South Korea, and a very serious matter. This thing is coming to a political climax, and tension is rising in a very difficult, confrontational way.
Steve Evans reporting there in South Korea. Now, the quantity of debris in space is at a crisis point. There's so much of it floating around the Earth that future missions could be under threat. Our science correspondent Rebecca Morell has been looking at how to give the Earth's orbit a bit of a spring clean.
We've been spacebound since the 1950s, making amazing progress and countless scientific discoveries. But for every advance, we've left something behind: space junk. At the University of Southampton, scientists are watching this waste.
So these are all the objects that we can track at the moment.
There are now thought to be 22,000 bits of space rubbish bigger than 10 centimetres. Smaller pieces are thought to number in their millions.
Space debris is made up of lots of things, but any space mission, any spacecraft can ultimately become space junk. Many people would say that low Earth orbit has already exceeded the kind of capacity that it has for space junk, and that we'll see into the future lots of collisions.
But low Earth orbit is about to get even more crowded. At Clyde Space in Glasgow, they're manufacturing tiny satellites called CubeSats.
This little thing is the size that we're talking about. It's 10 centimetres cubed, and it's transforming the space industry.
The idea is to have hundreds of CubeSats working together in vast constellations. But some fear they could become the junk of the future.
We build spacecraft, and we don't want to shoot ourselves in the foot by making space unusable. Most CubeSats are launched into very low orbits, and they have an orbital life of about 3 to 5 years, which means at their end of mission, they're already deorbited. There are other spacecraft up there that are quite large, that are not functional, that could potentially cause a lot of damage if they were to collide with another object.
Next year, scientists will attempt the world's first cosmic refuse collection. A spacecraft will test whether firing a net can snag a satellite and see if harpoon technology is effective in space. They'll also find out whether a sail can drag debris out of orbit. But with costs running into millions of euros to take out a single piece of trash, this cleanup doesn't come cheap.
If you have a $100 million satellite that gets wiped out by a piece of junk, then you start thinking, well, maybe I should have done some of these missions to actually get rid of these pieces, because it would have been cheaper to begin with.
This year, British astronaut Tim Peake saw the damage that space junk can do. This is a chip in a window on the International Space Station. It was thought to have been caused by a piece of debris far smaller than a millimetre. Experts say we need to rethink how we look after the environment around the Earth. If not, we risk space becoming inoperable. Rebecca Morell, BBC News.
Back on Earth, with 1 month to go before Christmas, the White House has taken delivery of a Christmas tree that will be the centrepiece of festive decorations. It's a 19-foot Douglas fir tree. It was received by the First Lady Michelle Obama. It was grown at a farm in Pennsylvania, and it will go up in the Blue Room, we're told. Scores of volunteers will now help to decorate it, but they've only got until Tuesday before it's unveiled to military families. Finally, the British Royal Air Force Aerobatic Team, or Red Arrows as they're commonly known, are known for their epic tricks they perform in the sky. But if you've ever wondered what it looks like from the eyes of the pilot, take a look at this. There you go. This was filmed from the rear set of one of their Hawk T1 jets. The pilot's performing the corkscrew over the Muscat in Oman. Apologies if you've just eaten. The Arrows perform a number of set manoeuvres, including the Heart, the Diamond Bend and the Vixen Break. Thanks for watching.